Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Ben, and this is a very belated monthly wrap-up for the months of September and October of 2022. So it's been a while since I've made a video. Those people who have followed my channel for a little while now would know that I was kind of in a terrible moving situation. Sorry for the sun here. We had 3 months kind of hell between trying to sell our house and buy our house. Mostly it was trying to sell our house. And a lot of things either falling through, not due to any fault of us, or maybe some particular buyers that put a lot of demands on us. Whatever it was, we continually had our move-in date pushed back. However, it has now happened. We've been in our new house for about 2 weeks now. I'm outside on my screened-in back porch, just enjoying the unseasonably warm weather. It's in the 70s here. Got a couple of cars here and there that are driving by the property, but otherwise I'm in a fairly remote area. As I look out my back screen, I really just see the road and I see a farm preserve. And I don't really see much else around me except for nature, which is great. We moved to a really nice area, and we have more space to move around in. And, you know, as moving goes, we're still unpacking. My library is not unpacked yet. I've started unpacking my office, so I have access to some books. So what I thought I'd do on this beautiful Friday while I'm out here is just film really quickly, as quickly as I can, the monthly wrap-ups for September, which I was never able to get to, and October, which I didn't read much. I only really read one book that month, so that shouldn't take too long to talk about. But as things stand, we are starting to get to a sense of normalcy again. So I'm hoping at this point to start make videos a little bit more frequently. So with that, let's begin talking about the things that I've read over the last 2 months. So September was the second month of Book Trek. That was a 2-month event that I captained, I guess you can say, along with some great co-hosts and some also some great people who participated in it, where we basically read and celebrated Star Trek fiction. The first month was to read fiction from the more established Star Trek that was more under the Roddenberry influence. That would be everything from the original series all the way up to Enterprise. And then in September, it was Strange New Worlds. Yes, there is a new Star Trek show called Strange New Worlds, but it didn't just mean that. It was pretty much anything that was outside of that original sphere. So the newer Star Trek, it could be from the J.J. Abrams, or it could be from the Kurtzman Trek, as difficult as some of that is, or it could be from Trek that really only exists within books. No characters have ever seen the screen. So I read 2 things for that. First thing I had read was Star Trek Picard, The Dark Veil. Again, you know, from the Picard series, this is the second book that was released. And Steve Donahue, one of my co-hosts, I know that he had said that he had read these Picard novels and he didn't like any of them, but I've actually liked both that I've read. The one last year I thought was pretty decent. It was a very non-traditional Star Trek novel. It was not a kind of science adventure at all. It was much more about bureaucracy and the downfall of the of the Federation, at least in terms of its ideals. This one is more about the Federation, or at least members of Starfleet, trying to regain those ideals, trying to find the path that was lost. And it's really a Star Trek Titan novel, because it deals really exclusively with Riker and with Troy, husband and wife team, as they try to help this species that is trying to leave the known quadrants, the get far away from the Alpha Quadrant and the Beta Quadrant to find life elsewhere. And they come across a Romulan ship, and they're not sure if they can trust it or not. And I like this overall. I thought there was some good action. I thought that the technobabble was actually really well done. That can be really bad sometimes in Star Trek, especially in some of the newer Star Trek. It never sounds convincing at all in Discovery, but the technobabble was pretty spot on, I thought, with this. It felt like a Star Trek novel. These felt like Star Trek characters, and I overall actually enjoyed this one. I liked it, even if Steve Donahue did not. The other thing that I read for Book Trek was Star Trek Prometheus. Now, this had the distinction of being the first Star Trek novel to be officially published in a language other than English. So this was originally published in German, and this, of course, is the English translation. I can only read a tiny bit of German, not enough for a whole novel. And I was excited about this. Star Trek Prometheus, I think there was only 3 parts to this series, and this is the first part. So we follow the ship, the Prometheus, which exists after Nemesis. So this is what's kind of called the Star Trek Litverse. The stuff that happened after Nemesis, but really it only happens in the books. Ever since the series Picard has come out, the Litverse is really, it was never really canon to begin with, but now you can't even really pretend that it's canon. So it exists in that world. And I made a video about that previous book that I talked about, and also this one. And overall, I was disappointed with this. It didn't feel like Trek, at least on moral grounds. It felt very much like a post 9/11 book that in many ways seemed to be justifying torture. I was getting, flashbacks of Donald Rumsfeld with this one. Even having Spock unnecessarily torturing people, and having some kind of babbling about justification and how he doesn't want to do it, but really, it's the kind of book that says that there's no other way, but they don't really prove it to you. So I was overall disappointed with this. I'm not going to go on to read the next 2. Maybe things do get better in the next couple of books, but I was a little bit soured with this. I did read another Star Trek thing in September, and that is this graphic novel, Star Trek: The Q Conflict. It was a fun story about Q and some of the other overpowered entities of the universe having a war, and that war is kind of tearing the fabric of reality, so they decide instead they're going to have a contest. And Q takes the crew of the main Star Trek series, including, at least to a certain point, the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. And he takes them and he mixes them up into teams, and they have to compete with each other. And it was overall a fun ride. I had a good time with this. I had read the writer of this. I think they're 2 brothers. I had read their previous collection, or I'd previously read a collection by them about the Mirror Universe and Next Gen that I liked quite a bit. And this was okay. My one drawback, I think, with this is that the story is just kind of too big for the limited space that is given. I think it definitely could have been fleshed out more, and it would have been more satisfying. The other thing that I read in September, I read this as a group read with Greg from another bibliophile reads, Mark Book Time with Elvis, and also a subscriber, Sonia Devenyi. We have been having something of an informal Gothic book club where we are reading the kind of major or influential Gothic works in chronological order. So September fell upon Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And this is my 3rd time reading Frankenstein and my 2nd time reading the 1818 edition. I believe in high school I read the 1831? It might be 31. The revised edition that Mary Shelley had made, and I think the one that most people end up reading. And then about 10 years after that, I wanted to reread, and that's when I really came to understand that there were 2 different versions, and the original version, the 1818 version, I gave a try, and I found that I actually liked it quite a bit better. She's still the young radical when she wrote that, and her sensibility, I definitely connect with a lot more. It seems like In the revised edition, Victor Frankenstein, the creator of the monster, kind of is let off the hook in a lot of ways. And it felt like Mary Shelley allowed her critics to determine what the book was about rather than sticking to, her youthful interpretation. And I like this one quite a bit. It's much more iconoclastic. It's a little more cynical. Victor Frankenstein is a total a-hole. I would love to know what Mary Shelley thought of Victor during this time. Victor is somebody who whines, who seems to want a lot of attention, who's very self-serving in his methods, much more sympathy is placed on the creature. You kind of get that old cliche when it comes to Frankenstein. It's that Victor Frankenstein's sin was he dared to play God, which in the 1818 version you get no sense of really at all. His sin is that he abandons his creature. His creature really shows every opportunity to have become a rational, caring, loving being, and one who would have been an amazing asset to humanity. But because Victor immediately abandons him and continually rejects him and refuses to solve even the simplest of problems with the creature becomes a bane on humanity. Although there's more talk about him becoming a bane on humanity or his potential to wreak havoc against mankind. All of his anger is continually, at least his physical violence towards human beings, is always related to or towards Victor. And those around Victor. He doesn't ever target anybody else except for a couple at a cabin that he burns down their house after they've left. They don't even live there anymore. So there's a lot that I can say about this. I do wish that if it was fresher in my mind and I had had time in September, I would have loved to have made a video just on this book. And it probably would have run 20 minutes long. But as it stands, I'm way behind, and it's been over a month now, so I'm a little bit foggy on some of the details and some of my thoughts at the time. But needless to say, I did enjoy this. It is very well written. It really is. And I will certainly read it again at another point, and it'll definitely once again be the 1818 edition. So that brings me to October. I only finished one book in October. There's two reasons for that. One is that I was incredibly busy as far as packing up a house, moving it, and then getting everything to a new house, and then trying to unpack. It's been a very, very long couple of weeks. So my whole middle of October was nonstop. Basically crashing every single night and then getting up and starting again. When I did have some free time, one of the things I started doing was teach myself Latin. So I started going through these books here, which I'll make a separate video about these, a really quick one about why I'm learning Latin and my methods of doing it. So I didn't finish these books, but these were some things that I was reading at the time. The book that I did read and finish was Anne Rice's The Vampire Lestat. Originally published in 1980, was it 1984? Yeah, I think so. I know it takes place in 1985, I guess. The second book in the Vampire Chronicles. When I was in middle school, I had seen the movie Interview with the Vampire, and I loved it as a young, impressionable young male. And although a lot of the homoeroticism totally went over my head, and I read the book in middle school as well. It's one of the first adult books that I read. That and Pet Sematary, and I don't remember which one I read first, but they were both in the same year. And I just never got around to reading this. I think because the premise didn't quite interest me. It was, I knew it was Lestat basically becoming a rock star in the 80s, and I kind of like my vampires historical and gothic, and not, in spandex on a stage with, a lot of Aquanet. So that just never really interested me. But over the past year or so, I've been thinking more and more about going back to this series and giving it a try, reading more of it, especially after Anne Rice's death. I was thinking more strongly about it. And then I saw that Steve Donahue and Matt from Mayberry Book Club were doing a read-along of it. And I thought, well, this is one of the few books that I actually had access to, even though most things were packed, because I actually knew what box it was and I knew where that box was. So I was able to take it out and actually read it throughout the month of October whenever I had some time. And so I'm glad I did. I actually really like this. It is really well written. Anne Rice, she is a very, very talented writer, and I've heard that sometimes goes away in some of the later books. But most of this book, you have that bookend of Lestat the rock star, and I have to admit that I didn't have a huge interest in that. But it's mostly historical fiction. Him back in 18th century France, in Paris, traveling throughout or different parts of Europe, coming across other ancient vampires, and I thought that stuff was actually really good. I really enjoyed all of that. She explores so many different ways to be a vampire, or how people at different time periods might interpret what a vampire is, whether it be satanic or like a pagan deity. Would they characterize themselves as evil, or maybe not, depending on whatever context they were created in, or what their inclinations are. And I like that. And in many ways, it felt like a love letter to the Enlightenment. I know at this point Anne Rice was still atheist, and she kind of had a real come to Jesus moment later on, which affected some of her books. One of them, which she retconned herself out of the series, where I think Lestat finds God. That is no longer officially a part of the Chronicles by her own admission. But at this point, she was still very much more of a secular, godless skeptic who was infatuated with Enlightenment principles. And I definitely I enjoyed that. There were some characters in here that I really found fascinating. One of them being Lestat's mother, Gabrielle. Her method or her path of vampirism. She basically kind of rejects humanity, and she lays in the earth and just wanders. I found that stuff to be really fascinating. And there's a whole mystery in the second half about those who must be kept. Incredibly ancient individuals. And I thought that their depiction was really fascinating. I found that whole subplot was really drawing me in. And so much of vampirism in this, yes, it's about powers, but it seems so much about, becoming a vampire, being a vampire is a sensual experience. And so much of this is sensuality without taboo. Whether that taboo is incestuous or pederastic grooming, it's like she throws things in there that you really want to take a pause and be like, hold on, we might be going a little bit too far. Now, there's also a huge amount of homoeroticism in this. Like I said, I haven't read Interview with the Vampire in many, many years. I don't remember how strong it was in that novel, but it's very strong in this. And I'm guessing that would have felt way more taboo back in 1985 than it does now. That doesn't faze me at all. The other stuff certainly does. But I understand it. When they're a vampire, they're no longer human. They no longer live by our rules. So that's part of being, being apart from nature or supernatural. So I did enjoy this. I do want to go on eventually, not right away, but to Queen of the Damned and read some of the others in this series. So that is what I read from September through October. Let me see if I can make a pile here. Sorry, you're shaking my table a little bit. It's not that impressive for 2 months. I've got 3 Star Trek books here. Oh no, sorry, I forgot about Frankenstein here. I can throw that on top. So we've got the Q conflict, Picard, the Dark Veil, Star Trek Prometheus, the Vampire Lestat, and Frankenstein. As always, if you've read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm glad to be back. If you've stuck with me and still subscribe to the channel, thank you. Thank you for your patience, and I hope to have more videos quite soon. But if you read any of these, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and as always, thank you, BookTube.